You're listening to WEEU Radio, broadcasting at 830 on the AM dial from Reading, Pennsylvania. I'm Jingle Schnutz, the WEEU Holiday Festival of Sound Elf. Have a great time with you during this holiday season. And now, more of our Holiday Festival of Sound.
Merry Christmas. This is Matt Gorney from WEEU, and thanks for listening to our Holiday Festival of Sound. Let's continue with the festivities with the Missionary Sisters of the Precious Blood Convent of Reading.
Remember Rutchies? Well, if you have a little gray around your temples and a few war wounds of winter on your aging and aching body, you remember those winter wonderlands where you belly flopped onto a flexible flyer or a lightning guider at the top of a big hill and proceeded on a rocket vertical plunge to an uncertain fate. All you knew is that at some point, somehow, somewhere, you'd come to a stop, maybe in a snowbank, maybe in a thick bush, or hopefully not, maybe against a tree trunk. Well, likely as not, you just coast for those magical moments and glide to a soft landing in the slushy flats. You also knew that you'd have the ride of your life, over and over and over again. Sure, your snowsuit, if you were lucky or rich enough to be wearing one, would get soaked, and sure, you'd freeze your butt off. Sure, the time came when the law of diminishing returns kicked in, and lugging your sled back at the top of the hill was starting to wear you down, even in the exuberance and unbound energies of your youth. A day on the Rutchie was the perfect prescription for a good, sound sleep at night. Well, if you're wondering what we're talking about here, we're talking about Rutchies, a purely Pennsylvania Dutch country phenomenon. Yes, other areas had and have good coasting hills or sledding hills, but here we had and have Rutchies. That's Rutchies, from the German word Rutsch, which translates to Slide. Now, a good old-fashioned Rutchie is hard to find these days, even here in Dutch country. Oh yeah, there are good hills and sliding is still popular, but they are hills, nothing more, not Rutchies. Rutchies were once, and in the lifetimes of many of you, almost municipal services. When a good sledding snow fell, streets and roads were closed for sledding. Cross streets were either marshaled by Rutchie sledders or were also shut down to allow maximum runs. But things are different now. Roads are treated and cleared within hours of the first snowflakes fall. Rutchies are hard to come by these days. True Rutchies, that is. A little bit ago, WEU's feedback host Mike Faust recalled the golden age of Rutchies with his listeners. We'll hear some of their Rutchie recollections in a few minutes. First, though, let's go back to an article in the December 1878 Reading Eagle, headlined Favorite Coasting Grounds of Reading. The article addressed the fun of it all, but also the inherent dangers of riding a Rutchie. During the past few days, a great many boys and some girls have been enjoying themselves on the Rutchies in this city. Certain streets being used for coasting grounds. Among the favorite coasting places are the upper portions of Chestnut Street, Washington, Elm, Buttonwood, and Greenwich, lower portion of Washington Street, North Front Street, and Center Avenue beyond the Charles Evans Cemetery. That dangerous place, Walnut Street, between 3rd and 4th, is also being used by a number of children, and some large boys tried the Berks and Dauphin Turnpike, starting near the Turnpike toll gate and coming eastward to within a short distance of the Harrisburg Bridge. The longest declivity, and the place where the most accidents have occurred, is on Elm Street, where, when the coasting ground is in good condition, the sleds that start from Lombard Street run at nearly the rate of a passing passenger express train, all the way down to 8th Street, and some cross 8th and run to near Poplar, a distance of over half a mile. At this place, a number of men and boys were severely hurt last winter. One man had his throat cut and lower jaw split by falling on a piece of tin, and several others ran against a wagon with their sled and were carried home. Night before last, and last night, during the drizzling rain, the Elm Street coasting ground was lively up till midnight. Above 11th, there are a great many loose stones on Elm Street, and persons standing at 9th Street could see the fire sparks when the iron-shod sleds came down the hill and struck the stones.
Well, that's the way it was in 1878, Charlie. But our feedback listeners this year recalled some of the Rutchies that were familiar to them in more recent years. Perhaps you'll remember some of them, too.
And we had a wonderful Rutchie here in the little town of West Wyomissing, which is where I still reside. We had a nice hill, which is only about 3 blocks from where I live. And it was a hill that it was named after the family who lived at the top of the hill. It was a big single home, and it was called Isley's Hill. And I still call it that today, although I don't think there are many residents any longer in our little town who would know that's what it's called. No one ever uses it, I don't think, anymore because of the traffic that is now going up and down the hill. But years ago, and you're right, anybody who knows what Rutchie is over the age of 40. And we had a lot of fun in that hill because the township at that time would block it off for us. We could go all the way from the top of the hill and come down at least 3 blocks, and then at the end of my street on Cleveland, there was another hill that went up. And it wasn't as steep as the one on Isley's Hill. And if we had a good sled and the winter weather was good for snow and ice, we could go from the top of that hill and come almost up to the top of the hill and hit Cleveland Avenue. And they'd block off Garfield Avenue and some of those streets for us so that we could go down without any problem. Had a ball, and of course you'd have a couple kids jump on top of you when you went down the hill. So you had more weight, and we had a ball.
Pee-wee and Rudy and Alm and Phyllis and all the people that used to gather down there at Isley's Hill to go sled. And on a good night, you go from the top of Isley's Hill down up to the other, halfway up at least the other side of the hill, going up towards Cleveland Avenue. What I liked the best was going to West Lawn, though. I used to like the best to hop cars, run after the cars and hop on, hook onto the back of the bumper and take a ride up through Cleveland Avenue, up around to Weller's, and then jump off and go up to West Lawn. You ran along with a small sled and grabbed hold of the bumper, and you never hooked on the top. You try to hook on the bottom underneath and then take off, especially buses. You used to love to get a hold of a bus and take, because they didn't go as fast and were easy to catch. And you catch them and ride up through, and there'd be like Shorty Mare and them guys. They caught the thing, and you were smaller than them guys, and they caught it. You run behind them, and then they'd hook their feet into the front of your sled, and they'd run along. And if they didn't like you, they'd unhook you, and then you fly into a snowbank.
I grew up in the area that Bob and Marcia grew up in, but I think I'm older than they are. And we went on the old Owl's Field.
Okay,
we go all the way up to the top of the hill from Garfield Avenue up to Reading Boulevard. And there used to be a dip. It was that time it wasn't a road yet. And that dip would throw you onto the hill, and we'd go down clean to the edge of Garfield Avenue.
So you used to get a little air then when you go over that dip, huh?
Yes. And bounce on your stomach.
That sounds like fun.
We had a lot of fun there. And I remember Pfeiffer's store, like Bob was talking about. But I grew up in the boulevard, so all of it. But like Bob and Marcia, we had a lot of fun there at night. Did the same thing Bob did. We used to hook our feet, our instep into another one's sleigh. And then we'd have like what did they call it? It's like a toboggan, but there might have been 6, 7 of us hooked together. Well, you stopped, then everyone else stopped, but then you had to walk all the way back up the hill again. My kids used to ask me, what did you do when you were little? And I tell them about the sledding over there at the Owl's Field.
I had brothers. We sledded on Yoder's Hill. I was raised in Laureldale. And, of course, we didn't have toboggans in those days. It was just a sled. My brothers did have a few accidents. My one brother, he ran into a tree, and then he got a big gash in his leg from the runner of the sled, but they still kept on sledding, and they spent a lot of time doing that. I never liked it myself because I'd have to go with my brothers, and they got a little rough.
The hill behind the Mount Penn Tower, that was the place to be when I was a kid. We'd just say, let's go, we're hitting the tower today, and off we'd go. And the were called flexible flyers, steel runners. And I used to have a secret that I used to keep to myself as a kid. I used to carry the small bars of soap that you couldn't use anymore. They were too small, and squish them together real hard and and dry them out by sitting them near a heater and stick it in my pocket and take it with me. And I had the fastest sled on the hill because I'd take this bar of soap after each run and hit the runners with it because it was a wax-like substance, but it was also slippery because it's soap, of course. And I used to tear down that hill. We made trains by hooking feet into there's little gaps in front of the runner sled. They're formed in a way that the front end is rounded or squared off with a little steel bar going down the middle, which opens up 2 sides where you can lock your feet in by sticking your toes down through it. And we'd make trains also. But riding down the tower hill, we used to collide. If you didn't turn quick enough or your runners didn't grab, you had to lean to one side of your sled and ride down, and the stone wall would take the other side of your sled and narrow down the lumber on the handle sticking out. And then if the plows didn't get up Hague Road just yet, you could go down the Tower Road, right bypass the intersection and go right on down. That was almost like a 1.5 mile ride. Tell you that, we used to take our sleds, because we had ropes attached to some of them, and hook them to each other or stack them, and one of us would, take turns pulling all the sleds back up the hill so the rest of us could be lazy.
Back in the 50s, I was a young girl, and we lived in the city, in the northwest section. And there were a couple of places that the city would block off with the barricades, and they would have a Rutchie there. And one was in the 700 block of Gordon Street, and my grandmother used to call and say, they set the Rutchie up, and then we would go down that Rutchie. And then there was also one off Clinton Street, right by where the Olivet Boys and Girls Club is, that they called Clay Hill. And we would go down there, and it was, I'm not sure who owned the property at that time. It's now fenced off, which is a good thing, because it was dangerous for us, but back in the 50s, nobody thought much about it. And so we would use sleds, and we would use cardboard boxes, and all kinds of things. And we just had so much fun. Well, it depended on how much snow there was. But they would use the barricades like they use now to close it off for recreational things, if there's a parade or, something like that. And there were quite a few of those in the city that they would block off. But we used to go on Gordon Street in the 700 block. Now, it was steep, but not too steep. But when I think back, we were nuts. Because you could have gone right under the barricades, right into the street, at the other end.
Uh-huh.
And nobody thought about that. but that's the way it was.
Well, I have a spot, and this is in the late 30s, Hamden Boulevard to 12th Street on Pike Street. It was always blocked off, and at the bottom at 12th Street, the city put cinders. And two of our friends were on the sled. The fellow was on the bottom, and the gal on top of him. And when they stopped, they slid off the sled, and the fellow had cinders in his cheek. But it was fun. And then one of our crowd had a car, which was rare in those days, and he took us up to the top of the Skyline Boulevard from Oak Lane, and then we'd come down there and go down, I guess it's Richmond Street. And when we crossed Hamden Boulevard, we said a prayer. Of course, there weren't that many cars that day. And I don't know I think we went almost to the college. Wow. But we only did that once.
Living in the Muhlenberg Park area, what originally was considered Muhlenberg Park was Elm Avenue, which went right through the park, which at that time, right before that, was actually the people in Reading had their summer homes there. That was one of them. That wasn't too steep a hill. And then for those who are old enough to remember Farmers Fairfield, that was a steeper one. These were both roads, which we used. But traffic, of course, was nothing like today. And I know that people were saying, we had so much snow. But people forget that, at least when I was small, we didn't have snow plows coming through our street. There was no such thing. The snow removal, if it was on the Pottsville Pike, which was called at that time, which is 61, well, then maybe you'd see a snowplow or two. But on the side streets, you didn't see snowplows. So what the cars actually rolled down, so to speak, and tampered down, that's what you used. And that's one reason that I remember we could go sledding practically all winter.
And that's the way it was on those sledding hills known to Berks Countyans as Rutchies. I'm Mike Faust.
My name is Rich Conrad, an elementary band teacher in the Reading School District, and I want to thank Reading Musical Foundation for their support of our music program. RMF's Operation Replay program collects donated instruments from community members and connects those instruments to students in need. Our students absolutely light up with joy when they're given this opportunity. If you have an unused instrument collecting dust in your house, please consider donating it to Operation Replay. Your generosity can make a difference in the life of an aspiring young musician. Find more information at readingmusicalfoundation.org.
Merry Christmas to you. This is Eastside Dave, and I am absolutely thrilled to be able to spend these precious holiday moments with you here through the wonder of radio. We celebrate a very special birth at this time of year, but now I'd like to offer you a reading about yet another birth that's very, very important. It's your birth. Psalm 139 says, "For you are fearfully and wonderfully made." And with that, I'd like to read you something by Nancy Tillman. It's called "On the Night You Were Born." On the night you were born, the moon smiled with such wonder that the stars peeked in to see you, and the night wind whispered, "Life will never be the same, because there had never been anyone like you ever in the world." So enchanted with you were the wind and the rain that they whispered the sound of your wonderful name. The sound of your name is a magical one. Let's say it out loud before we go on. My name's David. Say your name. It's very special. When the news of your birth hit the universe, it sailed through the farmland, high on the breeze, over the ocean and through the trees, until everyone heard it and everyone knew of the one and only ever you. Not once had there been such eyes, such a nose, such silly, wiggly, wonderful toes. In fact, I think I'll count to 3 so you can wiggle your toes for me just like a child. Wiggle your toes. Do it now. It feels great. It feels wonderful. When the polar bears heard, they danced until dawn. From faraway places, the geese flew home. The moon stayed up until morning next day. And none of the ladybugs flew away. So whenever you doubt just how special you are, and you wonder who loves you, how much, and how far, listen for wild geese honking high in the sky. They're singing a song to remember you by. Or notice the bears asleep at the zoo. They're sleeping because they've been dancing all night in honor of you. Or drift off to sleep to the sound of the wind. Listen closely. It's whispering your name again. If the moon stays up until morning one day, or a ladybug lands and decides to stay, or a little bird sits at your window a while, it's because they're all hoping to see your smile. For never before in story or rhyme, not even once upon a time, has the world ever known a you, my friend, and it never will. Not ever again. Heaven blew every trumpet and played every horn on the wonderful, marvelous night you were born. You are very special. Thank you for your gift, and a Merry Christmas.
You're listening to WEEU's Holiday Festival of Sound, and I'm WEEU's Wanda Drusba. This show is our gift to you, and it features hometown entertainers like our next performer. He lives in Reading, Pennsylvania, and his first recorded album project was recorded by Berks County-based Mountain Laurel Productions. He's gone on to record for various labels, including the prestigious Windham Hill label, where one of the recordings he collaborated on won a Grammy. Here is Berks County's own guitarist, Dave Cullen.
Isn't he absolutely marvelous? That was David Cullen on his signature classical or nylon stringed guitar with a couple of classics for us here on the Holiday Festival of Sound.
Happy holidays from the 165-year-old Ringgold Band. We are thankful to the Reading Musical Foundation for enabling us to continue our tradition of live music for audiences throughout Berks County. With their generous support, the Ringgold Band has been able to continue the tradition of live concert band music through outreach programs to middle and high school students and senior citizens. Thank you, RMF, for helping us to grow from a group of 15 men in 1852 to 65 musically qualified men and women who play so much more than marches.
Welcome back to our WEEU Holiday Festival of Sound presented by the Reading Musical Foundation. Back a couple years ago, entertainer John Bressler came to the WEEU studios live to perform for the feedback audience with host Mike Faust. Give us a little bit of Christmas cheer, if you will. Here now is John Bressler.
Well, I thought, since we have some extra time here, I get to do something I normally don't get to, that I do in my live show. I've never done this on WEEU. It's a thing I like to call True Christmas Greetings and the Most Beautiful Christmas Lights of All. So many people say that you just never can really hear real Christmas greetings, or that Christmas, somehow the lights are just not as meaningful as they used to be. And a few years ago, I found a way to make that go away and bring back true Christmas meaning to Christmas. And it involves, I guess, being from Pennsylvania, you know, in the early days, we used to be hunter-gatherers. Have you ever noticed how men hunt, or women shop very well and men hunt? That's because that's how our roles used to be. People would go to the mall. Men would walk in and they would shoot and kill just one type thing. That's why men shop. If they're going to get underwear, they go and they stalk it, they find it, they shoot it, they cut it, or they cut it down, they gut it, they bring it home, and that's it. Women, on the other hand, can buy 37 different things at one time. They can walk in because they were used to hunting and gathering and all sorts of things. And keep that in mind as I tell you how to see the most beautiful Christmas lights of all. Go park your car at the first legal parking space at the biggest shopping mall close to where you live on a Friday night. Get somebody to give you a ride home. Park by the main doors. The next day, when the mall is absolutely packed with people, is when you come back to begin your festivities. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon is when it's best. When people are out hunting for the one thing we don't hunt for food anymore, but what we do still hunt and stalk are parking spaces. So, before you start this, one of the things I like to do at the mall is I like to go in and I like to play with the directory signs. You know, where you walk into the mall and it says, "You are here." Then you go to a completely different door and it says, "You are here." How do they know? But there's not a parking space anywhere. Now you begin your festivities and make a big deal about it. Slowly walk out to your car and make a big deal. And make a big deal about getting in your car. People will begin to notice. Cars will begin to gather. To kill the wounded parking space by the door. And in the Northeast, you start your car and it sends up a puff of blue smoke, which calls people from even on the other side of the mall. So now you're warming your car up, and you've got about 8 or 9 people wounded or nosing in there to get the wounded parking space. This is when it's very important to become very safety conscious. While your car's running, get out and clean all of your windows. Check all of your marker lights. Check those turn signals. Now you've got about a dozen people waiting, salivating for the wounded parking space. Because otherwise they're going to have to park in Birdsboro. Take a shuttle bus to the mall. Get out that tire pressure gauge. Check all of your tires. If you really have nerve, rotate your tires. You'll have Buicks, SUVs, Corvettes, motorcycles, everything nosing in there to see who gets the wounded parking space. And when you think you've gathered the most people you can, you light the most beautiful Christmas lights of all by putting your car into reverse. And you light your backup lights. You'll hear a sigh from all of the cars. You begin to back out of your space. Get about 3/4 of the way out of the space, and then make a big deal about this next part. Go like this, hit your head. I forgot something. Pull back into the parking space very quickly now. Shut your car off, get out of your car, and listen to the Christmas greetings.
John Bressler! You've actually done that, right?
I did. That was not a bit I wrote. I actually tried that.
Based on a true story.
Yeah.
You're listening to WEEU's Holiday Festival of Sound. Here's Berks County's own Eric Koala, Jennifer Kinder, and the Uptown Band with their rendition of Merry Christmas, Baby.
Merry Christmas, baby. You sure did treat me nice. Merry Christmas, baby. You sure did treat me nice. You gave me a diamond ring for Christmas. Now I'm living in paradise. I'm feeling mighty fine. Got good music on my radio. Said I'm feeling mighty fine. Got good music on my radio. Yeah. Well, I wanna kiss you, baby. I was standing underneath the mistletoe. Santa came down the chimney about 3:30. He left all these pretty presents that you see before me. Oh, Merry Christmas, baby, Merry Christmas. It's sure been good to me. No, I haven't had a drink this morning, but I'm lit up like a Christmas tree. Christmas tree, Christmas tree. this morning. Said I haven't had a drink this morning. Said again, said I haven't had a drink this morning. But I lit up like a Christmas tree.
Ah, the holidays. What a wonderful time of the year, Andy Williams. So many fond memories as a child around Christmas time. I remember waking up to lots of presents underneath our Christmas tree, the bright twinkling lights, the music, the wonderful spirit that Christmas brings. Spending time with family, the Christmas dinner, and yes, Mom's delicious Christmas cookies. No one made cookies like Mom did. Recently on Feedback, we asked you to recall some of the items that Mom baked around this time of the year while you were growing up, and to share some of those traditions that you still do today. Here's just a short sampling of those discussions.
My mom used to make these super mega cookies with all kinds of brown sugar, and they were so thick. They were probably the size of a medium book. The brown sugar is the secret to making good cookies. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas Day, Mom would make them, and there would be about 6 of them in the oven, and we would always leave one out for Santa Claus. I said, Mom, I think the cat got the cookie, because I didn't believe in Santa Claus, and there was always like 3 bites taken out of it. I always would say that the cat, she had an old little gray cat, and she would put tinsel on the cat right before Christmas Day, and it was just a great time.
My mother used to bake a date and nut bread at Christmas, and it is delicious. It's very moist. All of us, meaning my sisters and my sisters-in-law, all have the recipe, and we have all tried to make it the same way as my mom did, but it never turned out the same. We also made, it was called a butter scrumptious cookie, and it was scrumptious. It was mostly butter, of course, flour, confectioner sugar, and I believe there was vanilla in there. But, oh, they are delicious. They just melt in your mouth. And my mother would hide the cookies at Christmas time. She baked before Christmas, so, a couple weeks before Christmas sometime. So she would put them in tight cans and store them in a place where we couldn't find them. And then when it got close to Christmas, of course, she would get them out. But there were 6 of us, so they didn't last very long.
When I know Christmas time was coming when I was growing up, when my mother started baking cookies around Thanksgiving, and she baked and baked and baked, and she had a whole kind of bucket, different thing. She had that thing full of cookies, and then she started baking other cookies, and she wanted to have them because at that time you had a lot of people stopping around the house, to visit, and she always wanted to have something for them to, cookies to eat and also to give away. She made chocolate chip cookies. That was one of her favorites. And then we made these cutout cookies with the stars and the animals and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, my goodness, yes. She would make chocolate chip cookies, and they didn't even get cool. She'd make bread, and she'd put cinnamon, and, sugar, and butter on it, cut the crust off while it was hot. Oh, it was so good. I know one year I was friends with someone in the service, and she invited this gentleman for dinner, and my sister was also dating a gentleman in the service, and we invited him, and she must have baked 100 pies, and she sent all his pies back to the guys that didn't get to go home for dinner. And she sent all the leftovers she sent up to the base for these guys. I'll never forget. That was my best Christmas. She really, she knew what she was doing. It's like, why are you baking all these pies? You'll see.
Christmas time, we would have shrimp and beer at New Year's Eve. My mom would leave the beer out overnight and then boil it the next morning to have shrimp. That was one thing I always remember. And then, of course, we were raised on shoe fly pie at Christmas and Thanksgiving, so that was it. There's nothing else to eat. I thought that was the national pie for the country, not the apple pie. That's what we ate at the holidays. Oh, it was delicious. We just had an incredible New Year's Eve, and that's how I first learned how to play canasta.
They're metal cookie cutters that I can remember from when I was 4 years old or so, which was around 1953. It's the shape of a horse. There was horses and bells and stars and Christmas trees, and my horse was the favorite one to cut the cookies out. We just baked for Christmas. I would eat raw cookie dough too, and I used to carry it in my pocket, carry it around to my brothers. You didn't eat that, my brother. This was my favorite. I would cut the shape out for this horse, when I like 4 or 5 years old, and then I would play with that piece of dough that was shaped like a horse. And she made homemade pies, and in all these years, I've never tasted a pie like her pie. Everything was homemade from scratch. Like you cut up the pumpkin and boil it, and the cookies, you'd roll them out with a rolling pin, and eggnog. That was a specialty. We had milk in bottles that the milkman left on the front porch, and you had the cream would be at the top. You had to shake it, or else sometimes remove it and make homemade whipped cream. So she'd mix the eggs and the sugar and the milk and the vanilla, and we would drink it. It was delicious.
Oh, she would be baking sugar cookies, all kinds of cookies, and it smelled terrific because the kitchen was at one side, and it warmed up, and it made the whole house smell good. The sugar cookies were really good. Then every so often she'd put icing on them, or she'd make little Christmas cutouts. I remember she had little tin cookie cutters for snowmen and for stars and for things like that. Even Santa. Sometimes I think one was just Santa's face.
We take vacation to bake cookies. My mother helps, myself, my daughter, and 2 granddaughters. And we have basically a 4-day marathon of nothing but baking cookies. And we make usually at least 60 to 70 batches of cookies. We used, I think it was over 50 pounds of flour last. Yeah, and we already have people asking us, when are you baking your cookies? Because we'd take them along to work and, hand them out to friends. And only maybe about 4 years ago we started it, and we just love doing it. It's just so much fun. Oh, man. Of course, the traditional chocolate chips, snickerdoodles. We make coconut macaroons. We also make fudge and bar cookies to put in the boxes or whatever. We put them in snack bags and such, just to change things up.
Thanks for sharing, everyone. Thank you, Mom, for being such a wonderful baker and cook. Merry Christmas and happy eating to all.
Happy holidays from the 165-year-old Ringgold Band. We are thankful to the Reading Musical Foundation for enabling us to continue our tradition of live music for audiences throughout Berks County. With their generous support, the Ringgold Band has been able to continue the tradition of live concert band music through outreach programs to middle and high school students and senior citizens. Thank you, RMF, for helping us to grow from a group of 15 men in 1852 to 65 musically qualified men and women who play so much more than marches.
I hope you're enjoying WEEU's Holiday Festival of Sound. Always local recordings, local musicians. Some things, as I described at the beginning of the show, are chestnuts. They've been around forever. I like to think of them as Christmas ornaments. I get them out every year, dust them off a little bit. If they still sparkle, we like to kind of hang them on the tree that is our theater of the mind here for the Holiday Festival of Sound. So with me right now is John Fundyga. And John was telling me the most interesting story. John's like a walking, talking encyclopedia about the early days of rock and roll and doo-wop history here in Berks County. So John says, I have a recording that might be interesting for historic value for the Holiday Festival of Sound. So tell us all about this recording from start to finish. It's a local recording. It does involve Christmas, but you say it's kind of weird and wacky, and we're going to get to hear it in just a little bit, John.
It's a spoken word thing. It was on a CD I put out 20 years ago called the Al Stan Masters, and it's a collection of songs that were, quote, written by Al Zanino, who wasn't really a musician, but he would sing his compositions to competent musicians, and they translated into musical language. And but anyway, on this, I use it as a bonus track, and it's called A Message from Santa, and it was recorded, I think, 1954, around there. And the interesting thing is, it was a one-sided 45. One side was pressed, the other side was just wax that was never even cut. And Al made this record because the kids from the neighborhood used to love for him to do this like the world's worst Santa Claus, in my opinion. But the kids seemed to like it, and he said, well, instead of me doing the voice for them when they come over, I'm going to press this record. So he knew a recording engineer. His name was Juranis from Reading, who did a lot of the old Reading stuff that's on the CD, the Al Stand Masters. And Al asked him, can you record me? Okay, so he's doing the Santa Claus. I could do a little impression if you like. It's like, hello there. This is Santa Claus. I mean, I really sounded like
it.
Yeah,
not bad.
It sounded like Al. It didn't sound like Santa. It didn't sound like Santa at all. But anyway, this record is great. You got to hear it. It's amazing. Dave will play it for you. But it speaks for itself. I don't know what else to say about it. You've got to hear this record. It's a rare chestnut from Reading, PA, 1954, off of a one-sided 45.
Okay, so let me get it straight. And he pressed it, and he made copies, and he handed them out to the kids in the neighborhood. Is that right? Instead of having you do the impression. Is that correct?
That's what he told me. He gave them out. I'm thinking, well, just do the impression, Al. But he said, I think he wanted it as a token, so the kids could always remember his...
This is exactly the kind of rare recording I love to bring out and find something like this. This goes back to my Christmas ornament analogy. Like, this is that special ornament that's been around forever. You know, it's like, I got to have that one on the tree in the show this year. So go ahead, line it up, announce it again. Tell us what we're about to listen to.
This is A Message from Santa by Al Zanino and Juranis. If you listen closely, you'll hear a little elf in the background. It's kind of unintelligible. I mean, it's actually a backwards voice, but sped up. But it was a noble attempt at trying to sound like an elf in 1954. And it's called A Message from Santa. It's not on, there was no record label per se. It's a one-sided 45, and you're never going to hear it anywhere else but on WEEU.
And it made the kids happy, so let's hear it now. Thanks, John.
Sure. It's a pleasure.
Hello there, little girls and boys. Come right into Santa's workshop. Santa has a message for you.
Hello there. This is Santa Claus. Have you been good, little girls and boys? You know old Santa won't forget you if you be good and mind your mommy and your daddy. Well, we're all very busy up here in the North Pole, making all the doll babies and bicycles, wagons and the cowboy sets. Oh, a lot of nice toys for the good little girls and boys. Well, here comes my little friend the elf. Hello there, Nicky. Nicky said he's so happy that he could visit with you. Nicky said be sure to be good, and we won't forget you on Christmas. Now don't forget to hang your stockings on the fireplace or on the Christmas tree, and old Santa will fill 'em up with a lot of goodies. Don't forget to go to bed early on Christmas Eve, and Santa will be there. Well, goodbye. See you all on Christmas Eve. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.